Hey, welcome to my channel. My name's Christina Kent and I'm an artist based out of San Francisco. And today I want to show you a little bit of how I prepared for my first ever solo exhibition. This was definitely my most ambitious painting project ever, and I'm just so excited to share the work and the process with you. So right now it's early November. I'm in the studio pretty much every day to try to get all the paintings done for the show. I need to submit the images by the end of the month, and I'm going on Thanksgiving break, so I'm just trying to get everything done before Thanksgiving so that I'll be good to go. And here are some of the other paintings that I recently finished. I haven't decided which ones are gonna go into the solo show yet, but I have a few of pretty big sizes. There's some over here too that are also drying. So just trying to figure out which ones I want to have in the show, and hopefully I'll have that decided in about a week or so. So today my goal is to get the block-in done on this canvas behind me. It's a 4-foot by 4-foot canvas, so it's pretty big, but hopefully I'll be able to get it done by the end of the day. It being my first ever solo show, I really wanted my work to make a splash, and so I decided I was going to work on mostly large-scale paintings, so around 4 feet by 4 feet, 4 feet by 6 feet, that sort of thing. It was my first time ever having a whole gallery to myself, and I wanted to take advantage of that space and fill it up with some really large, really ambitious paintings. But big paintings take a lot of time, meaning long hours in the studio. So I just finished the block-in stage. I have all the colors laid out with pretty thin paint, and so now I'm going to go in and add details kind of section by section. As I describe here, changing the scale of my paintings also changed the way that I worked. I found it usually when I do smaller paintings, I just do one underpainting that's in like a brown tone, and then I go directly to the layers of color on top of that. But for these larger paintings, I found that that wasn't enough. Instead, I found it really useful to put a layer of thinned down colors after doing my brown underpainting, so I could have a layer of thin colors across the whole painting just to make sure that all of the color shapes were working. And then when I went in to add the final layers of paint and details, I also had to break the painting down into sort of alla prima sections and do things section by section. I was a little nervous about doing so many large-scale paintings for this show, but once I got in the studio and I got into the flow of things, I found that the paintings actually came along pretty smoothly. Today is another painting day, and I'm going to be working on this painting here. It's kind of an industrial scene right at dusk, and I put a thin layer of paint down and I'm going to start building up the details. In addition to the quantity of work that I had to make to fill this exhibition space, I was also thinking a lot about how each piece would come together to create a cohesive body of work. Most of my paintings are inspired by scenes from my everyday life, so in a way they're already some cohesive body of work in that they're all relating to things in my life, but I wanted sort of a stronger theme, a stronger narrative to be connecting all of the pieces in the work in a more obvious way. I started to circle around the idea of day to night in the city, where we're focusing on the transition of light as we go from daytime to nighttime in an urban environment. The pieces also started to mirror somewhat the rhythm of my own days in the city. I usually work by myself during the day, and so the daytime paintings were a lot quieter and softer, versus the nighttime paintings. For me, night is when I'm usually spending time with my partner and seeing friends, and the nighttime paintings naturally started to seem more active and dynamic. I also wanted to include some transition paintings, like this painting of a scene at dusk around my art studio when the sky was just lit up with the most beautiful colors of sunset. Preparation for the solo show took way longer than expected, and you can see here I'm also toning canvases for a large commission that I had at the same time as I was preparing my solo show paintings, which was just a little overwhelming. After finishing all the large paintings, I realized that I'd basically created only large paintings for the show, and I was thinking and talking with the curator of the show that it would be nice to have some smaller pieces that are a bit more affordable and to give some variety to the sizes of the paintings in the show. That's something that I hadn't even thought of when I was planning the works for the show, but I think it's a great idea. So kind of at the last minute, I decided to work on some smaller pieces like this one. I really enjoyed spending those long hours in the studio and working on these paintings. For me, it was just so invigorating, and I felt like I was working really hard, but I just had so much creative energy that I was able to make it happen and create all of these works. Like I painted more than I'd pretty much ever painted in my life, and yet I didn't feel burned out or drained. I felt really energized. At the same time, I do think the pressure was a bit stressful, especially because I was working on a really tight timeline, and so I felt like every painting I did had to be a home run. Like I felt like I couldn't do any bad paintings. And if you've seen my other videos, I like to talk about this, that I think bad paintings are a necessary part of the process. So if you're in a situation where you don't allow yourself to fail, then I think that can really hinder our creativity and have a negative effect on our creative process. So definitely in the future, when I'm doing my next solo show, I'm gonna budget in more time for experimenting and for paintings to fail, because I just think that that's so essential to us as artists. When planning for the show, I made this mock-up of the gallery space, and I put the painting ideas in the space, and it was just really helpful to do this little mock-up to get an idea of how many paintings I needed for the space and how the different works might look in the room for my solo show. The curator and I decided to start with sort of the daytime paintings and then move into the paintings at dusk, and then it would go into the evening paintings and the nightscapes. So it kind of gives the viewer a sense of time as the day goes on. So I finished all the paintings for the show finally, and I was like so relieved to have them all done. I took pictures of the work and sent them to the gallery, and and so you would think that I could finally rest and relax, but no, there was still more work to do. One of the big ones, which I find really tedious, is painting the edges of my paintings. As you can see here, it looks really nice when the edges are painted, and it allows the painting to be hung on a wall without a frame and still look really good. But at the same time, it is just not a fun part of the process, and so it's something I often save for last. But ultimately, it does look really nice, and also, I think framing all of these pieces would have been crazy expensive and would have been a nightmare, so I'm happy to paint the edges instead. And then, of course, after painting the edges and varnishing and all of that good stuff, then we have to add the hanging wire to the backs of the paintings. And that's the thing. Usually these processes like painting the edges or adding the hanging wire or even photographing a painting, documenting it, whatever, usually that stuff doesn't take very long, and so I don't think about it as part of the painting process. But then when you have a solo show and you have to do that for all the paintings in the show, all that time starts to add up. Because I was so busy doing all the paintings and kind of running very last minute, I painted the edges of the paintings with very little time to spare for them to dry, which I thought it would be okay. I gave them kind of like the minimum drying time, but I didn't take into account that it was going to be a rainy week and very humid, which actually kept the edges from drying as fast as I thought they would. I came to my studio the morning that I was supposed to deliver the paintings, and the edges were still a little wet, which is not ideal. So I would definitely say next time I do a show like this, I'm definitely budgeting twice the necessary time for the paintings to dry. And it's hard. I tried to give myself hard deadlines and make sure that my painting was done in time, but it's just so hard to resist the temptation to just do one more painting. Thankfully, the paintings were dry enough so that I could at least wrap them up in glassine paper and take them over to the gallery. And then they weren't going to install them for another 2 weeks or so, so I knew that the edges would finally be dry by then. I wrapped up all the paintings in paper, which also took forever, even with the help of my super supportive partner, and I loaded them up in my car, and finally I was ready to go. As I drove up to Davis, I reflected on all of the paintings that I put together for the show and felt just a huge sense of accomplishment. I knew the preparation for the show wasn't over. I still had to set up my social media marketing schedule. I had to write my newsletter and reach out to my subscribers and collectors. I had to get the word out for the show if I wanted people to come. And with the show being in a different city, I also really wanted to reach out to art organizations and artists in Davis to try to get the word out. Still, the hardest part of the work was done. All in all, I created 11 new paintings, most of them very large scale, one of them even the biggest painting that I'd ever made. I also learned a lot in the process, the main thing being just how long it takes to do a solo show. While I was able to make it work this time around, I think next time I would budget a lot more time. So that's all for this vlog today. I hope you liked it. And if you're in Northern California, be sure to check out my solo show, which is at Pence Gallery in Davis from January 9th through February 29th. And if you're not in the area, don't worry. I'm going to be working on a virtual exhibition tour, which I'll be posting here to my channel. So be on the lookout for that. Anyway, I hope you got some inspiration from this video. Let me know if you have any exhibitions coming up or other big, ambitious creative projects that you're really excited about. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, a big shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, be sure to check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.